Amen. Hey, can we just celebrate this great God of ours who defends you? So good, so good. Hey, as you're taking your seat, can you shout out something to our online campus today? Got like 25, 30 people hanging out with us online. And then one other thing, if you can mind the gap a little bit, we got a lot of people in our house today. There's a space in between you and somebody else. Can you kind of fill that in so we can, if some of our people in our back want to take a seat, there's some space here and there. Our connections team can help you with that. Hey, we're going to be in 1 Samuel 17 today. So check that out. I just gave away one of my cues that I was going to use in my message. My bad. Anyway, so I want to talk to you today about, just for a few minutes, about one of the most relatable or most familiar, famous stories in all the Bible. I want to talk about David and Goliath, yeah? Yeah? Good? No? Bad? Whatever. I've heard this story before. I know this. That's how we get, right? We get to this story. We're like, oh, I know this story. Where are we, Kids Point, today? Well, thank God for that. Yeah. But I want to talk to you about a different angle on it. I don't really want to talk to you about the giant. I don't want to talk to you about the 5 stones. I want to talk to you about mastering the minimal. Master the minimal. That's where I'm going today. That's what I want to talk to you about. And to get you there, you're like, what does that mean? I want to talk to you about one of my first jobs that I had. I had a friend of mine from our church that owned a landscaping business, and so he was just starting out. He was small time at that point, and it was just a small little operation, and he was just looking for a bunch of young white kids to come do work for him. And so I was like 16 at the time. I probably wasn't even old enough to do this, and that's why I only got like the minimal stuff to do. But I had so much fun. I got to work with some of my good friends, and we just hung out together for a week. I did this as like a week stint during spring break, and I loved it so much. I was like, I went and quit my other job that was terrible, and I'm like, I got to go there. I got to do this. And we just had so much fun all summer hanging out. He had a pond on his property, and we would go up there and work during the day, and then we'd go swimming. And it was just so much fun. But I remember like some of these moments that we thought we were going to get to do. Like I'm seeing all these tractors driving around in big trucks. And I mean, what could be better than being a young kid and moving dirt all day long? It's just so much fun. Can I get an amen? Nah, what are you talking about? At this point in my life, I hate that kind of stuff. But at that point, I could care less what it was. I just got to hang out with my friends, and I got paid for it. It was great. Like a whopping $6 an hour. Can you remember getting paid that much money? Thank God we're not there anymore. But there was so many days. I mean, like heart of Kansas, hot sun summer, man. It's like 105 every day. And my job every day was to come in and water every plant on his property. All day long. I spent 10 hours every day of every week watering the plants. And when I got done watering one time, it was so hot, we had to start over again and water them twice every day. It was awful. I can't tell you how much I hated what we had to do, but loving the fact that I got to do it with my friends. And I remember one time my boss came to me, he said, listen, if you will, as you're walking through, if you will get to the spot where you're just like learning these plants and memorize them, he's like, I'll double your pay. So I memorized all of them. I never, ever saw double pay. Never one time. But I remember so many moments where I'm like, I hate this. I detest what I'm doing right now. There is nothing more minimal than just carrying a water hose around all of this 5 acres of property, watering every plant here and every tree. And when I get done, I get to start it again. And then we do every day of every week. And I remember the first time my boss came to me, he was like, I have a job for you. I'm like, yeah, water the plants, right? No, he's like, no, I need you to go plant a tree somewhere. I thought this was like gold. This was awesome. I was going to heaven right now. I get to go plant a tree, dig a hole in the ground and put the tree. This was awesome. He entrusted me with something, but only after I had mastered the minimal. I had gotten to a spot where the menial, the mundane, the boring in life, I was trustworthy at that, and now he can trust me with something bigger. He could trust me with the keys to a company truck and a shovel. I can't tell you how many hand-dug trees I dug in my life. It was so boring and awful and hard work, whatever. But I honestly, as I put my teeth into this message a month ago, the Lord really spoke to me about young people. And he said, man, you need to talk to young people. Because there are some people in our world today that need to hear and understand that before you ascend the ladder to something amazing, you got to master the minimal. Can I get a parent that will back me up on that? Amen. Thank you. That is good. Listen, I'm going to talk about one of the most familiar and famous Bible stories in the Bible today. And I want you to kind of turn or reignite your passion about the Word of God in your world. Because as we look at a passage like this, 1 Samuel 17, the story of David and Goliath, we almost get this mentality that I've lived this before. I've known this story. I've read it. I've been there. I understand it. I know the whole thing. I need to backtrack just a minute and get you to a space where I was just recently. How many of you are busy? You all are lying. Like, listen, if that's like a collective non-response because you're all in the same boat, I get it, all right? But we're all busy, right? We're all in the boat where we're just too busy. I don't have any margin. I don't have any time. I don't know when to do this. And we start like robbing our lives of things that are important because we're too busy, right? We're trying to reignite some margin. I need space, and so I'm going to stop doing that. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to stop going to the gym. Amen. I'm going to all these different things to find some space and some margin in my life. And one of the first things that tends to go is my relationship with Jesus, right? We stop reading the Bible. We stop praying a little bit. We stop doing we'll send up the desperate prayer every now and again. And every once in a while, the verse of the day will pop up on our phone. And, we spent time with Jesus today on the way to work as I read the YouVersion Bible app thingy. You know what I'm saying? But when was the last time you actually drilled down into the Word of God and you found like a living, breathing, active voice from God? Are you with me? Yes, no, maybe so. Listen, I'd gotten to that spot a couple weeks back, and I just was like, you know what? This comes through intentionality. Again, here's my favorite word, my word for the year. We have to be specific about this. And so I had gotten to that mindset, and this is just me being a little bit transparent with you, but I had gotten to the mindset that I'd read it all. I'd been there before. I've read the Bible so many times. I know it. You know what I mean? We look at chapters. We talk about chapters. I know this stuff. I know it. I know what's there. I know the outcome of the story. We win every time. You know what I'm saying? Like I get this stuff. And I just really felt like the Lord was like, hey, just remember it's alive and active. It's a consuming fire. Don't forget the fact that I can move in ways that you've never seen before. And so what I did was I started reading I don't want to give too much away because I actually get to preach in this in December, but I started reading in the book of Luke, and I found a story that was so relatably familiar to me that I'd read so many times before, and I found new life out of it. And it was almost like the Lord was reminding me, see, you can take the most basic story that you've read in the Bible 1,000 times, and I can breathe new life into you through it. And I just want to encourage that to you today, that even with a story like this, with David and Goliath, or with any other story in the Bible, you are missing something if you're not consuming it. Open it, read it, find out what he has for you, because it's different than what he had last time. It's new and fresh and relatable to you in this moment today, right now. You need that. So listen, at this point in our journey, Saul has been king for a little while. I don't know how much time it is, but he is king over Israel, and let's face it, he's a pathetic king. He's not very kingly. Ironically, if you look through his life, he actually ended up being king of Israel for 40 years. The same amount of time that King David was king and King Solomon was king. They were all kings for 40 years. He just doesn't have like a determined ability like you see from other kings, or that you would or should want out of a guy that you were following. He wants victory, but at the expense of somebody else. He wants somebody else to rise up to the challenge and take it from him. He's content just to kind of sit back and do this, whatever he does. But the ironic thing I see about this is that David would never speak harsh words against this guy. Never. In fact, he refused to raise his hand to him several times in his life, even though that Saul was coming after him. He wanted to kill him, and he refused. He refused to do anything that was aggressive towards this king. He had this mentality that said, regardless of my true feelings, he is still the Lord's anointed. And he still deserves my honor and respect. And that spoke volumes to me, because those of authority in your life deserve your respect whether you feel like they deserve it or not. Yes, no, maybe so. They do. And there's a lot of people in our world that we don't feel like deserve respect today. And they don't get it from a lot of sources in our world. But for us, for the people who call God Father, He's the one who put them there. And so we have to acknowledge that, and they deserve this respect. Listen, at this point in this story, these two armies are camped out against each other, a valley in between them, mountaintop to mountaintop, and they are just taunting each other day after day after day after day. Goliath comes out and does his daily challenge. He does this for 40 days. Why is 40 so much in the Bible like this? 40 years as king for 3 kings. He comes out and taunts them for 40 days. Jesus fasts for 40 days. There's all these different 40s in the Bible. I actually looked this up, and it's 40 is like the number of testing. It's a season of testing, and so that's what this is. Goliath is testing them or taunting them for this period, 40 days. They're gonna do this, and I don't know that they actually planned this is going to be a 40-day thing or if it just happened that way. But you get this story, and so David is walking into this battle. He's walking into this zone where these armies are facing up to each other, and here he is. He's just 17 years old at the time, and he's going to walk into this battlefield. And it says in, what verse is this? I don't even know, but this verse right here says that Goliath went out and shouted up to the army of Israel, "Why are you lining up for battle? I'm the best soldier in our army, and then all of you are in Saul's army." And do you see what he's saying there? He's essentially saying, I'm the best soldier in both of our armies. Like, there is nobody better of us than me right here. Choose your best soldier to come out and fight me, even though that he's saying, like, I will annihilate him. He says, if he can kill me, our people will be your slaves, but if I kill him, your people will be our slaves. Here and now, I challenge Israel's whole army. Choose someone to fight me. Saul and his men heard what Goliath said, but they were so frightened, they were so terrified of Goliath that they couldn't do anything. And I think that, we know the end of the story and we win, right? But in that moment, in that day, you and I would have been just as terrified. We would have been freaked out. And this is the season, or this is the mentality that David walks into. David's background, he's one of 8 sons in Jesse's family. We don't know much about this family. Jesse had big dreams about his boys. And the way that we know that is by what he called them. We get introduced to 3 of them in this story, 4 of them actually. The oldest, Eliab, his name means God is my father. You can kind of just get the sense of who Jesse was as a father with the names that he called his children. Eliab is God is my father. His next son, Abinadab, he says his name means my father is generous or noble. His next son, Shammah, his name means God is there. David, the last of them, we aren't introduced to the other ones in this chapter, but David means beloved or friend. You can kind of get this sense from Jesse that he was a God follower. He was this guy who was devout and devoted, regardless of what he said, regardless of the things he did. He made some mistakes as a father, clearly, but don't we all? Yeah? But he has this sense of God, determination, and division. They were devout. They were religious God followers. They were fierce fighters. 3 of the 8 are in the army. Probably the rest are either too young or are also necessary to have some kids at home helping. As is the case with David, he was there to support the family while not all the family was there. And it says this, that in the middle of this story, we're introduced to what's happening with the army of Israel. We're introduced to a little bit of David and his family, Jesse and their brothers and all that stuff. And it says this in the middle of this story, that one day Jesse told David, hurry and take this sack of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread to your brothers at the army camp, and here are 10 large chunks of cheese to take their commanding officer. Find out how your brothers are doing and bring something that shows that bring us back something that shows that they're all right. They're with Saul's army fighting in the Philistines in Elah Valley, or they were supposed to be fighting. They're not really at this point. David obeyed his father, got up early the next morning and left someone else in charge of the sheep. He loaded up the supplies and started off. He reached the army camp just as the soldiers were taking their places and shouted the battle cry. The army of Israel and the Philistine army stood facing each other. And so I got to ask, how is this battleground just open for anyone to come into? You know what I'm saying? Like, anybody could just roll up on the army and be like, hey guys, how's it going today? What are we up against, right? I just get this amazing little cute picture of young little 17-year-old David with snacks from mom and dad. You know what I mean? Like, I totally get this image of, like, these guys in the foxhole, and here comes David running up, being like, hey, guys, you want a cheese stick? How about a juice box? You know what I'm saying? Let me fold out the little wings for you so you don't squeeze it all over yourself. That's the image I get in my mind. This is what David rolled up into. And undoubtedly, as we press into this story and we hear the frustration in their brother's voice, they would be angry and you would be angry too. What's this little pipsqueak kid going to embarrass us with mom's cheese sticks? We're trying to fight a battle here today. Or we say we are, not really actually doing anything. I mean, who does this kid think he is? But then at the same time, how incredibly minimal is it for mom and dad to be like, hey, go take your brother some snacks. They're doing the dirty work. You just have to bring them cheese sticks. I mean, this is awful. Not only is it that, but he says in verse 20, he says, David obeyed his father, he got up early the next morning and left someone else in charge of the sheep. I mean, he already has the dirtiest and worst minimal job of all families. Take care of the sheep. But now I'm going to embarrass you in front of your brothers because you're not cool enough, old enough, or strong enough to be able to go fight the battle. You're just the cheese stick boy. I got to be honest with you. There's another message here that I'm going to preach some other time, but the someone else, right? David obeyed his father, got up early in the next morning and left someone else in charge of the sheep. Like, isn't there a hero of every, sequentially of every part of the story? Like, what if there was no someone else? What would have happened then? And doesn't he also get to take part in the credit of this giant who's dead because he was the someone else that took over when David had to go deliver some cheese sticks? Sorry, another sermon for another time. I need you to understand this, that at every level of your life, there is some minimal that you have to master. At every level. This isn't just, I learned it and it's done and I'm going to move on. No, the minimal that I face in my life today, it looks different than yours. And I loathe it just as much as you loathe yours. But we have to master those minimal moments for us to be able to press into the mastery that God has for us. At every place in our lives, he is trying to get us to trust him with greater, but it starts with us being trustworthy in the minimal. Listen, I don't know who that's for today or what it speaks to your heart or to your life, but I need you to understand that you should stop avoiding and trying to get out of the minimal just because you hate it. Sometimes we just have to stick it out. It says this, that David left his things with the man in charge of the supplies and ran up to the battle line to ask his brothers if they were well. And while David was talking with them, Goliath came out from the line of the Philistines and started boasting as usual. David heard him. Can you imagine that moment? Can you imagine the noise, the roar that's happening? I mean, no doubt these people knew that Goliath is the best of both armies. And so while there's fear and terror on the Israelite side, there's roar and just celebration on the other side because this could be the day. I mean, can you imagine the panic that must have been happening every time they heard this guy's voice? Every time this guy came out, don't you think they could have been thinking like the opposing army, the Philistine army, maybe they came up with a strategy in that, between time, overnight, that they came up with the idea that we're going to send Goliath out, he's going to roar, he's going to do his thing, and while he's doing that, we're going to flank him. We're going to just take him over. I mean, couldn't that have been a strategy that they could have done? And so every time they hear this guy's voice, there's got to be a collective panic. This could be the last time. If nobody goes to face this guy now, they're just going to get frustrated with and they're just going to be done. And here is David hearing this for the very first time. He's got this God demeanor and God defense and he's learned a few things. He's got this amazing ability to see a human as a human and understand that my God is bigger than that. regardless of his size, regardless of the spear he holds, regardless of the whatever that goes in front of him or whatever he's got surrounding him. My God is bigger than that. And don't you wish you had that kind of devotion? Don't you wish you had that kind of God reality? I do. You know, maybe he's too young and naive to realize that this is really stupid, but maybe that's what we need in our world today. You need to understand that the size of your God, the one that you see, minimizes the size and strength of your adversary. He does. He does that every time, but only to the ability that we have to believe in who he is. He says this, as David is inquiring about this, who is this guy? Who is this guy, this Philistine think he is, making fun of the army of the living God? Let's show him who's boss. Come on, guys, let's go. Get your cheese sticks. And nobody follows him, nobody. They're all terrified, except for this young 17-year-old pipsqueak. Some soldiers overheard David talking, and so they told Saul what David had said, and Saul sent for David, and David came and he says, Your Majesty, the Philistines shouldn't turn us into cowards. I'll go fight them. I'll go fight him myself. And he says this, he says, you don't have a chance against him. You're only a boy. And he's been a soldier his whole life. I was doing my final prep this morning, as I always do. Felt easier to get up today because I had that extra hour. Did you not love that? Like, this first time in my life, I actually felt like I had an extra hour. So good. And as I was reading through that, I just totally envisioned the idea of, actually it kind of had like one of those like flashbacks, like saw my life flash before my eyes. Didn't take too long and it wasn't that interesting. But I had all those people that had said a word against me in my world kind of flash through my mind. Dude, you don't stand a chance. You're just young and inexperienced. Man, I just kind of wonder how many people in our world we shut down because while they're mastering the minimal and God is ready to elevate them to something bigger, and we come along and be like, oh, dude, you're too young. Just sit down before you hurt yourself. Here's a cheese stick. You're not big enough yet. You're not strong enough yet. You don't have enough experience yet. What if we just became a little bit more ridiculous in the way that we believed about people? In the way that we believed about who we have at just our little campus, our little church, to be able to entrust and say, you know what, yes, let me back you up. How can I help? Put me in, coach. Because look at what happens next. He says this. Well, let me just say this first. To the person who's been told that before, you can't use that as an excuse. You can't use that as an excuse. You cannot. If you've heard God say it to you, then you've got to believe it, whether they believe in you or not. You've got to move on. You've got to. Your life cannot be defined by somebody who said you can't, because the Lord said you can, and you need to listen to him more than anyone else. And sometimes the people who don't believe in you will be the one you last expect. He says this, verse number 34, but David told him, Your Majesty, I take care of my father's sheep. You could just see like the king's like, so? And when one of them, listen to this, listen to the language. When one of them is dragged off by a lion or a bear, like there's options here. You know what I mean? It's not just one time. He says, I go after it and I beat that wild animal until it lets the sheep go. And if that wild animal turns and attacks me, I grab it by the throat and I kill it. Sir, I have killed lions and bears, both of them multiple times. Do you understand the fact that as he was called into the minimal, hey dude, go watch the sheep. And he's like, I hate this. It's in those minimal moments that the Lord is allowing him to build faith and trust and strength and adversity and accomplishment and celebration while he's totally alone. Nobody else is watching him. Nobody else is there to help. Nobody is there. It's just him conquering this moment alone, because this moment is coming when he stands before the king and says, listen, dude, I've been here before. The giant looked different, but the outcome was the same. I've got this. All because I decided that I'm going to master the minimal. I'm going to master the minimal in my world. He says, I've killed lions and bears that way, and I can kill this worthless Philistine. He shouldn't have made fun of the army of the living God, and the Lord has rescued me from the claws of lions and bears, and he will keep me safe from the hand of the Philistine. All right, Saul said, go ahead and fight him. And I love this. I hope the Lord is with you. Here's your cheese stick. In other words, you're not going to make it out alive. I've got somebody digging your grave right now, but you can't say that. I hope the Lord is with you. I want to tell you today, though, the Lord is with you. He is with you. He is with you with the giants that you face, with what you're facing in your world, with the whatever is coming next that you're afraid of, that you're terrified with. For you that are young and your whole world's in front of you and everything looks gigantic to you right now, the Lord is with you. And you've been through some minimal moments where the Lord has blessed you and given you an element of strength and determination to get you through the bigger that's coming next. And don't you dare let somebody tell you that you can't. Don't you dare. You've got to prove them wrong. There's a lot of proving wrong that has to happen in our world today. A lot of it. Listen, I don't know where this hits you today. This is really open-ended. Has to be for you and what you face today. The Lord didn't give me that. And so I just need you to just own this and pray through it. God, what comes? What happens next? So right where you're at, your heads bowed, your eyes closed, why don't you just make this a matter of your prayer with God in your zone today? God, I want to just thank you and pray over this church this morning. Lord, I pray that you would just give us the strength to be able to master the minimal. Lord, at every level of our lives, all of us are entrenched in some kind of minimal to get us to the next giant, the next thing in our world. And this is so open-ended, Lord. This can go in so many thousands of different directions. But I pray, Lord, that each one of these that are here today, each one of these people that are God followers, God, that they would hear directly from your Spirit about what they're facing in their lives. Lord, we pray that you would just rain down your peace and your determination into their hearts and their lives, because they also serve the same living God. Lord, we thank you for the amazing elements and moments of life change that are going to happen as a result of our mastering the minimal, God.